Craig Parshall. He's principal at Parshall's Policy, senior law and policy advisor in Washington, D.C.-based group, special counsel to American Center for Law and Justice, senior advisor to the National Religious Broadcasters, and founding director of John Milton Project for Free Speech. Interesting in reference to what we're going to talk about. Of course, he's an author, speaker on trends in on constitutional issues, culture, religion, media, technology, and Craig has been a huge asset, I know, from my tracking with him on the National Religious Broadcasters side, and I sure appreciate Craig spending a few minutes with us. Craig, welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on.
Craig, listen to this little 17 seconds. Listen to this little clip from President Obama.
Net neutrality has unleashed the power of the internet and given innovators the chance to thrive. Abandoning these principles would threaten to end the internet as we know it. That's why I'm laying out a plan to keep the internet free and open.
I don't know, it sounds pretty good to me. He's laying out a plan to keep it free and open. I mean, how good is that, right?
You know, my dad was an engineer, civil engineer. He used to say, we've all heard it, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It does sound nice, except for one thing. The internet has flourished through innovation, development, investment, primarily because it's been left alone. Now, there's some problems with the internet. We can talk about it, in this conversation. But primarily, the case hasn't been made for regulation. And if there is going to be regulation, by the way, the two ideas I hear in Washington floated around are a light touch approach, which I certainly would suggest if it's going to be regulated at all, or the heavy hand of the federal government. I think that's what President Obama, shock, surprise, is suggesting.
And, the thought of the internet being another utility and under the regulatory burden of utilities seems to me it's going to stifle the very thing that President Obama just said that we need to preserve. And
that's his goal. That's his mission. He says his intention is to make sure that innovation flourishes. What he's saying is, if we allow these big telecom companies like Comcast, Verizon, AT&T, the gatekeepers that we pay so we can get on the internet superhighway and do our business on the web, if we allow them to cut special deals or actually participate in the marketplace and decide who pays for what in terms of their side deals with other telecommunication companies, then it's going to stifle the possibility of upstart, new start companies that might have better ideas. But you see, it really gets down to how much we trust free enterprise. And I know there are limits to free enterprise, as there should be. It's called antitrust. Businesses can operate within free market until they get to the point of antitrust violations or anti-competitive techniques in the way in which they handle their business, then the law steps in. But the internet has flourished through a relatively free and open atmosphere. My problems with the internet are not because of any of the things that President Obama has listed.
Well, and I don't understand. I think about the competitiveness that is sometimes lacking in certain areas of the country when it comes to the internet. But again, I talked about this yesterday. We have these antitrust laws that can help that and prevent that in some cases, like they're trying maybe now to do between Time Warner and Comcast. But
let's go back, some 6.5 years when President Obama was campaigning the very first time for president. He made his position, to his credit, perfectly clear to the American people. He wanted a national broadband plan. He wanted to federalize all of our broadband internet connections. Now, number one, it ain't broke, so don't fix it. Number two, there are some areas, primarily agricultural areas and some rural areas, that aren't getting fast or broadband connections at all.
Right.
So it seems to me the solution would simply be, and I'm no genius, go to telecom companies like AT&T, Verizon, Comcast, and others, and say, we'll give you some tax credits, some tax breaks, if you will provide some connectivity to the internet to these rural areas. So just pinpoint the areas that aren't getting service, and we'll help you do that. But instead of having a small net to catch, tuna, he wants a big net that catches all kinds of fish that he doesn't need to catch.
Mm. And that's exactly right. And again, I talked about this idea of I talk about it continually as an economist about the idea of they can't create jobs, but they can certainly incentivize corporations to be innovative and to do some things through tax credits and other ways to be able to grow whatever it is their segment of their competitiveness is. They should be able to incentivize that, but instead we want to go ahead and do this. My concern is the freedom of speech. Now the government has a utility. I wonder what would happen if my local electric company, I'm in Philadelphia, if the local electric company here in Philadelphia decided that on their statements they were going to proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Right.
I wonder what would happen with that. I mean, after all, this is falls under the rules and regulations of utility companies, and where's that going to go?
I've talked about this a number of times in Washington through the John Milton Project that I helped found over at NRB. The whole purpose of that is looking at making sure that free speech flourishes on the Internet. And there are a variety of problems with free speech on the Internet right now, but we're looking at the Internet writ large here. My mantra in Washington has been this: we don't want the Internet subsidized. We don't want the Internet federalized. We simply want private industry and private technology to be incentivized.
Right.
Like you said, give some positive opportunities for government to sort of fertilize the landscape and then step back.
Yes.
But unfortunately, the current administration wants its hands on not just the big levers, but all the small buttons as well.
Mm. So let me ask you now, with the current environment, or at least the new environment coming in January, what are the chances of this? I mean, how do you feel from your gut? Is there a chance that something like this could happen?
Well, this Internet regulation issue, they call it net neutrality.
Yeah.
Sounds nice, just like Washington.
Yep.
It's a war of words. You have to get beyond the labels to see what is really involved. Net neutrality really is another code word for federal regulation of the Internet. Now, the way it works in our system with federal regulations and federal agencies is the victor goes to spoils in terms of national elections. When a president gets elected, one of the powers he has is to appoint a chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, and that's the agency that really governs. If anybody governs the Internet, I guess the FCC is the closest thing. They have limited jurisdiction right now, but they're seeking more power. This is under the Obama administration. So the president picks the chairman, and then the way it works is you have 2 Democrat appointments to the commission. You have 2 Republican designees to the commission. So you have 5 commissioners that control all of radio, all of television, and now certain parts of the Internet. There's a great power vested in only 5 commissioners on the FCC. And the balance of power always favors the party in power. So elections have consequences. Mm-hmm. And if now we've already seen a changeover in the Senate, and of course the Senate is the one that confirms appointments by the president. So even if there's an Obama-like president next time around, we have a Senate that has to confirm that nominee or reject them.
Right. If we can keep it.
Yes, if we can keep it.
Right. So this is not something that's going to take an act of Congress to...
No. In fact, here's the way it works. Congress passes laws that give a general outline of what the powers of the Federal Communications Commission are going to be. Mm-hmm. And then the specifics are written in through regulatory authority by the FCC. But they don't have the power to come up with new ideas. Congress gives them the general policy direction in terms of what their powers and authority are and the direction they're supposed to head. Then the FCC implements that and writes the fine-tuned regulations that implement the direction that Congress gives them. Except in recent history, this FCC under this current chairman and the chairman before since President Obama's election have been going off the reservation, I think, expanding the authority of that commission beyond their authority. And in fact, the two regulatory proposals to regulate the Internet in the past by the FCC, both were struck down by federal courts of appeal decisions on technical grounds. So this is the third time they've tried this.
So this is it's really a social control grab, power grab, however you want to frame it.
There's no question. And hey, if you're going to look at the one area of culture, society, industry, business that is interwoven into every one of our lives, it is certainly the Internet. Every communications medium platform is connected in some way to the Internet and is web-based. And so I understand that's the future of communications, and the person who controls communications controls the world at this point. Information flow is essential. So, yes, this is a huge power grab. There are some areas that I think the FCC should probably have very limited jurisdiction, again, in kind of an antitrust violation type of an approach, where only the most egregious problems are then subject to correction. But the way they're outlining this proposal, they would be into judging reasonable commercial decisions, whether certain commercial decisions by companies, technology companies, are reasonable or not, commercially reasonable or otherwise. That really is getting too many cooks, too many chefs in the kitchen.
Well, it's scary times again. It doesn't look like this president is going to let up. We're looking for another expansion. This is a department of the government that could expand, could grow, could gain more power. Of course, all at the taxpayers' expense. And we have got to do whatever we can do. And I guess what we can do is support our congressmen, our senators, to push back on this as much as they possibly can, even though their power may be somewhat limited on this.
Yeah, well, I had an occasion to file a comment with the FCC in response to this proposal, and what I said was this. Number one, you haven't done your homework. You have not proven to us that there's going to be no harm to competitiveness or innovation by this heavy-hand approach. You need to do your homework, do a study to show us, to prove to the American people that it will not harm innovation and competition. Number two, you're worried about these big telecom companies. You want to regulate, the gatekeepers. The problem is not in the gatekeepers. If you're talking about the open Internet, I have much a bigger problem with Apple and Google and Facebook,
right?
Who have, President Obama says, I don't want to pick winners and losers. Well, some of these companies like Apple and Facebook and Google and others have decided they're not going to allow certain Orthodox Christian or conservative viewpoints to be aired on their platform. They're discriminating. They're private businesses, so the First Amendment doesn't apply. But there are ways in which they could be encouraged to a higher standard of free speech on the Internet, but from a voluntary standpoint. So there's lots of work to do to make sure that we protect the Internet. After all, it's the number one vehicle for global news, information, and opinionating. And it's if we don't guard this, then the old idea of the public park or the village green, being the place where the public can get together to exchange ideas, suddenly that's going to go to the way of the dodo bird.
Speaking of Craig Parshall's Parshall Policy, Craig, how can people stay in touch with what you're doing? Do you have a website there, Parshall's Policy?
In fact, they can. If you're on LinkedIn, you can go to Craig Parshall site for my Parshall Policy work. I deal with a number of like-minded organizations in Washington, and I help them navigate some of the issues up there in Washington.
Thank you, Craig. Craig Parshall, I speak for myself, not everybody, but I think everybody agrees. We love your wife. We love the work she does, and we love the work that you're doing. We're so grateful that you're out there for us. Thank you. Craig Parshall's Parshall Policy. Financial Issues, I'm Dan Celia. We'll be right back when we get to the phones after this.